Today I'm starting another project. I have a boat on a Hewitt boat hoist, boat lift, and it's a manual. You have to crank it, and I've been doing that for years and it works. But I've just decided it's time to upgrade, and so I bought a kit to put a 24 volt DC motor on the hoist and a pair of lead acid batteries and a solar panel to charge them. It's away from where I can't plug it in. It's away from shore power. Well, my kit arrived yesterday, so I'm going to go break in and open the boxes and all and see what all I got. The motor is a Lift Tech motor. It's a direct drive, so I should be able to take the wheel off of my Hewitt lift, off of the winch box, and install the motor directly. There's supposed to be a kit for that. There's a solar panel, and then there's a bracket and a kit for that. There's a battery tray, and the challenge for me with the battery tray is that the lift is a narrow one. I've had it for quite a few years. It's only like 110 inches wide, and I have a boat that's, about 100 inches wide at its widest point. And in doing some measuring, the cleanest way to do batteries is to mount the tray inboard, inside the hoist, and kind of up under the canopy. But it gets really close to my windshield if I do it with their standard bracket. So I bought one of their standard brackets with the intent to modify it and install it differently. I called and talked to somebody at their place, and we talked through what the options are. And my decision was to try, like I said, I'm going to custom modify a bracket, more the attachment points than modifying the bracket itself. But it's a bracket that ought to hold a pair of Type 27s and plug everything together. So let's see what's in this big one first. Lots of good things in here. Okay, now this one. Alright, this is all the connecting wire for the system, along with the, I don't know if it's all the connecting wire, but there's a solar charge controller, a 5 amp charge controller in there, along with instructions and some cables for the batteries. And brackets for the battery tray. 2 of their battery boxes, because there were some concerns I saw online from people who said that you had to be careful what battery boxes you used or they wouldn't fit in the tray. So I purchased their battery boxes, and I purchased Type 27s. I know I've worked with lithium-ion batteries. These are, I'm going to use lead acid because of the nature. I don't intend to draw them down very far, but I'm going to go with Type 27s instead of 24s. Just, it's a few dollars extra and a few more pounds, but they're, that's the best way to put it. They have more capacity, and so if I get on a day where I want to use it several times, you're waiting for solar to recharge it, then you'll draw the battery down less far. So these are like snap top boxes. Got a couple of lids for them. This is part where the solar panel will mount. This is the battery tray here, and these brackets attach to this tray. So they are supposed to be 3 inches, so that they'll go around the 3 inch. The the real way that these were designed is to go around a 3-inch square tube and hang on the top of the tube. But if you hang it, the tray sits down too far. So I'm going to try to modify attachments, and then the last one is, in this box anyway, is this is the tube that should support the solar panel, and it has another bracket somewhere here that I haven't gotten to yet, and then a little bag of nuts and bolts. So let's see what's in here. It sounds like it's hardware. This is a bracket for the solar panel, along with a number of plugs and grommets and nuts and bolts. And I believe the way that works is that this bracket goes up against the post, and then one of these goes inside. And let's see what's in this one. This one is a cover for the motor to kind of keep the weather off of it. Now this one might be a challenge because this says it's for a shore station, and I asked for one for a Hewitt. I'll have to ask about that one. And tape the other end too. I mean, I can split the cardboard open, but keep it together for the moment in case I need it. Alright, so there's the panel. Rated power of 30 watts, maximum current of 0.84 amps. That looks pretty good. So there's the motor. It should go right on the shaft directly. And this one is a key switch, but then I've purchased a pendant. So the idea will be when I'm standing on the dock, I can turn the key switch, make it go up and down, turn the key. And when if I'm trying to get work from in the boat, I'm going to run the pendant over so it's near the driver's station. They also make them with wireless, but the way mine is set up, it's not really necessary to go wireless. So, alright, so that's my pile of parts right now. And all I need to do is check and understand my install kit, because that just doesn't look right. Back later. So I have all the parts for my kit now. There was a part that was incorrect. The installation kit was incorrect, and give the company credit. I called them yesterday morning, and I have it in my hand today. The FedEx folks dropped it off about an hour ago. So one day turnaround, which was very responsive, and they sent me a label to send the incorrect part back. So my intention for today is that I am going to start assembling pieces. My boat hoist is away from the house, and so I'm going to sub-assemble whatever I can, and then I'll go over and do installation when I get over there. So these are the parts for the solar panel. And they give a nice illustrated instruction guide. And then I also have the solar charge regulator and extension stuff. And so I'm going to try to do is, I have my batteries, everything I need here, and I'm going to try to test all the wiring and so forth, lay it all out and try it before I go over and install it. So if anything is wrong, I can deal with it here. So it's nice hardware. It's the nuts are brass and the bolts are stainless steel. So what they want you to do is slide the nuts in, and they're trapped, and then run the bolt in. I thought that might be a difficult thing when I looked at the picture, but famous last words, but it seems like it's working. Because then it'll clamp down, because the nuts in there, the bolts here, it'll clamp down on the tube when it slides in, and then you can adjust the height and clamp it. Looks pretty nice. Then they want the end plugs installed and the cable run through it. That shouldn't be too hard. Got some really nice plastic plugs. Come on. It's a nice quality aluminum. One. Show the installation, but there's a grommet here to go into this aluminum piece, so that the wire doesn't get chafed or cut, I guess. I do have to say, from a quality standpoint, they did a nice job on these parts. Everything's been deburred nicely and cleaned up. Then in the next bag, they've got a package here that had the extension cable. It comes from the solar panel down. This will go solar panel to battery. This one goes from the charger to the battery, I believe. There's a battery jumper cable and a charge controller. So anyway, I needed to open that bag up because the next thing we have is this extension cable, and it needs to run down the center of the tube, and the socket end goes to the top. So it should be interesting here. I don't want to make too much of a mess, so let me unwrap the cord. So I can sneak this in. There we go. Sneak that in. See, the cord, extension cord, needs to go up through here, so it also needs to go through that piece at the same time, and I don't really want to unwind the rest of the 25 feet of wire yet. So the socket end is the one that ought to go to the right. Get out my solar panel here, make sure I get the right end on it. And I have to make sure that the correct connector goes. Don't want to scratch it. Make sure that lines up. So that's the one that goes up the pipe. And then there's a couple more grommets. Use some gravity to get that to go there. Come on. There it is, right there. Okay. Alright, this is the top end because it has the holes in it for this bracket. Get the wire through the grommet. Get that installed. Okay, that was easy enough. In my parts pile, I've got a stainless steel bolt. Washer and an okay, and it's a nylon inserted prevailing torque nut. Try to be plenty gentle with the solar panel. I don't want to crack the glass. There's the connection. Drop the wire through. Hook that one up. Looks like I've got more wire here than I need, so I can pull or push some of that back. Okay. As a trial, like I said earlier, I want to trial fit things. So I have a nice connection diagram here they give you, and the panels laid out here outdoors. It's not totally in the sun, but it's pointed in the right direction. So I'm going to get out the parts, and we're going to attach things together to make sure that everything does what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to drop a jumper wire on here that they provide. Positive to negative. I'd be really careful working with these big batteries, because if you short one of them out, there's a lot of energy and it's really easy to get hurt. So you sure don't want to short across terminals. You're going to be real careful with your tools. It's better if you have insulated tools, but I don't have such a thing, so. Alright, so they want to go from the panel here with the extension wire into, actually I have two pictures. So here's the second one, which indicates that the charge controller goes between the extension wire and the one to the battery. So as you go from the charge controller, or from the panel to the charge controller, screw that together, and the charge controller is actually, at this moment, the charge controller is, I'm going to call it complaining. It's making noise. It says it's trying to charge, and it says it has low battery voltage. Gee, I can't imagine why. So let's put this together without shorting the terminals together. Okay, so red there. And you can buy these 12 volt or 24. I just decided that it was a little more expensive, but 24 was a little bit more margin in how how things operate. Okay. So there, it's now happy. It says it's fast charging, but it also says it's at 100%, so it's bringing the voltage up. And it'll just trickle charge basically. So that looks good. I'm happy with that. Just for fun, what's my voltage across the pack now? I mean, the panel's not out in the sun, it's just getting indirect, but make sure I got this right. Yep. Go from here over to here, and I've got 26.27. And this battery's giving me 13.07. And this battery's giving me 13.2. For whatever reason, I pre-charged these. I've run them across the charger, and this battery runs about 1/10 of a volt lower than this battery. They're just slightly different. I just bought them off the shelf, and perhaps one's a little older or something, but it's within range. Should work. I'll just double check this. So this one is, yep, 1307.07. This one's 13.21, and the system is putting energy into it. Very good. And for my final test, I'm just going to see if I'm just going to power the motor up. I have the cables hooked to the battery. It's got a nice plug here. Got the keys. The motor is laying in the box, but it should, it's not contacting anything. The splines aren't contacting anything, so let's just make sure that it kicks over. Let's hold it down so it doesn't move. Got some guts, got some power. Alright, so that means I got everything prepared, I think. Oh, except for my mounting brackets and tray. Alright, I'll have to get with that here in a minute. Now I need to work on the mounting for the batteries. This is the tray that I bought, and it came with two brackets like this, and there were two choices that I could have made, and I thought this was the better one. It turned out perhaps not. What I was hoping or expecting was these bars to be 3 inches inside diameter, inside dimension, and then I could I have a Hewitt lift where the canopy rail is 3 inches by 3 inches, and I thought then that I could hook those over the canopy rail. And in truth, these are 3 inches to the outside, so they're only like 2.5 to the inside. I can still use them. It just means I have to use them differently than I had originally intended. And I bought the other tray. I think they were 3 inches inside. They were supposed to be. But the reason I picked these was it looked like I had a longer chunk of aluminum here. So what my issue is that the standard Hewitt, the standard one for a Hewitt, you would put these on this way, and you would hang it from the rail, and then this goes on the back, and it goes up against a post, one of the verticals, to keep it from, I'll call it, from sagging. But this is like 8 1/4, 8.5 inches across here, and my hoist is kind of narrow, and my boat is kind of wide, and if you try to do that, this piece is going to hit the windshield of the boat. It's really close. If it cleared, it would be a miracle. It just wasn't going to go. So what I want to do is position this ahead of the post. But again, the design where you hang it is that it's when you put weight on the tray, it's going to want to pivot. So one of the alternatives is to lift this whole tray up and put it on top of the 3-inch rail. But I only have 11 or 12 inches from the top of the rail to the canopy rails, and by the time you get the batteries and the battery boxes in place, there's really not enough clearance to do that. You might be able to get it in there, but you'd have to take the canopy off to take the covers off the battery boxes to get to the batteries to do any service. So that wasn't looking like it was any fun either. So I'm going to try an experiment, and I think what my process is going to be, I bought a batch of these stainless steel number 14, so they're like 1/4-inch self-drilling screws. And the tray comes with some nice stainless steel hardware for through bolts to attach these. My plan at the moment, what I'm going to do is this tray is going to mount alongside a 3-inch rail. So the 3-inch rail will, so if I set that down, I'll have a 3-inch rail, the top of which will come here. So I could screw in using these bolts, using these self-tapping screws. I can screw through here into the rail. Then, if I come up here, and I think I'm going to cut this end off. I wouldn't really have to, other than convenience. I maybe even could leave it on there. I'll have to think about that. I'll want to do though is cut this off. So here's my thought is, again, I've got a 3-inch rail at the side, which means I'm going to pick this up, measure up, put this up 3 inches, which would be about like right there, and drill through and put the through bolts through. And then this portion will be on the sitting on the rail, so it could take weight on the rail. I'm going to drill a couple of holes here so that I can run a couple of the self-tapping screws down from the top. I have a second one to repeat that on the other end. And my thought would be, this should be load bearing, and I should do these first, and then put in the bolts from the side. And again, I don't know whether I should take this off, or it depends. But anyway, carry the weight here, then the brace can take that stress from these guys, and we'll have 4 of those. The 2 batteries only weigh like 100 pounds together, so that shouldn't be too bad a weight. And I'm going to start there. I'll start with, probably just 3 or 4 bolts into the rail. And in fact, I'll have 2 holes I could use right off the bat, and I could put a couple more up high if I want, and see how strong it is. If it isn't strong enough, then they gave me this other nice brace, and if for some reason when I got the weight on there it was pulling too hard in the center and I needed some additional bracing, I guess I would do it this way. I would put some through bolts through this, and again a couple of screws into the top of the rail so that it couldn't twist in that direction. Those are my options. Those are the preparations I'm going to make. We'll see where it goes from there, but I don't see why it can't. I went out to the hoist, and I weigh about 160 pounds right now, and I can go grab a hold of that beam and and hoist myself, put my weight on it. And the beam, it flexes a little bit, but as you would kind of expect, you know, putting those two batteries, like I say, at 100 pounds, I'm 160, it should be, if it can take me, it ought to be able to take those batteries if I get all the screws in place. So that's my plan. So here's my completed battery tray. I took these brackets and cut off that extended piece, and I cut it off where this looped back, like that. So they're just turned into an L bracket, and drilled one hole there and two holes here. I put 3 holes in this brace and decided to repurpose that as a bracket. Did the same thing on the end as I did on the opposite end. And these are all drilled with clearance holes for 1/4 inch. And then I added, well, I drilled 2 holes to attach the bracket here. And then I drilled 3 holes across the back. So my intention is, when I go to the lift, the canopy rail is 3 inches tall and 3 inches wide. So these brackets, this is cut just short of 3 inches wide, so it'll sit on top of the square tube. And the holes are so I can run self-tapping screws down in. The bottom of this bracket is set to be exactly 3 inches from the bottom here. Same thing on the other end, and then in the middle, this bracket, again, I have it set up for 3 inches. And because I have clearance holes, there's a little bit of tolerance, a little bit of room for things if they're not quite perfect. These 3 holes I put in, they're 2.5 inches up from the bottom, 2.5 inches from here to here, so that if I decide that what I have isn't strong enough, I can put in 3 fasteners across. The holes are pre-drilled in the tray, and then I could drill in and bolt in with self-tapping into the side of the canopy rail. So right now all the fasteners are loose, but that's my battery tray, and as I say, it ought to sit on a 3-inch ledge, and then the weight of the batteries will mostly be taken vertically by the braces, by all 3 of those. You know, there'll be a moment on them due to the overhung weight here. You know, it'll be pulling and trying to twist it, and so the self-tapping screws on the top should be mostly in shear rather than in tension, so you're not just depending on the thread. And then these guys, if I have to put self-tapping in, could take vertical weight as well as, again, you know, from the bottom up, you know, any tension because the brace trying to twist. So that's my scheme. I'm going to go over shortly and see if I can install it. Okay, so what I decided to do, I showed a little bit where I was going to do the bolts. So I got the boat all the way up to the top, as far forward as it can go. And I do have about a hand's width to the windshield. I could have mounted it a little further forward, but I think that gives me just a little safety margin for the future. So I'm about 12 inches back from the post, and I could hang on here and it didn't make a big difference. It flexes a little, but I set the rack up here. I started with a bolt in the middle to position it, then put in 2 on each end, put in these 2, tightened up the nuts and bolts, and you can't see it, well, maybe you can. I put 1 into the side rail facing the outside, just to get a little more extra strength here in the middle. I got 2 more holes I could use, but I chose not to. That gets them positioned where I've got several inches to the canopy, so I can get the covers off. You know, there's a little bit of load on the rail, but it's solid. It doesn't seem like it's going to go anyplace. I think I got enough bolts on it. The instructions want you to put this whole thing together in one piece, the solar panel that is. Because it's out here over the water and awkward, I took it apart, decided to mount the base first. And they also tell you can use 2 of these straps. I had a free bolt hole and an extra stainless steel bolt, so I went ahead and through bolted the upper one and just strapped the bottom one. And now I'm going to go get the panel itself and slide her in there and get her bolted down. So there I have the panel mounted. I may have to play with the angle and make sure the angle's about right, but judging from where the sun is right now, it seems reasonable. Now I just need to feed the cable through. My strategy here is I want to get the panel installed, the batteries installed, all of the electrical wired up, get all this connected, and then in order to work on the winch, the boat needs to be in the water. And I want to make sure that all the electrical is ready so that when I get the winch installed, motor installed on the winch, I can hit go and everything will fire up. So probably the next thing I need to do is run some of that extra wire up under the canopy and get it down here to the batteries. The kit does provide some zip ties to fasten this wire down. For right now, I'm just tucking it in underneath the cords that hold the canopy down. And once I get things finished, I'll go back and dress it with the zip ties. Alright, got the batteries wired up. I'm going to put the tops on the case here in a moment. I elected to turn the batteries 2 different directions because of the length of the cables in order to keep things from being too stretched. It worked better to have the negative to positive there, but for 24 volts you got to have a positive to negative to negative, and then back to the harness. And I guess I got one more I got to screw down before I put the cap on. Okay. Actually, I'm not going to button these up too tight quite yet, because I'll still have the motor connect. This is the charge connections. I still have the motor connections to hook up on both of the batteries. So we'll see where that lands us. Okay, now I have the motor cable hooked up. I just laid it up here in the tray, but it's connected to the same terminals. And this one has a red stripe on it, so that's the positive. This one's the negative. It has black only. And you also have to be really, really careful with lead acid batteries, because the sulfuric acid, if you get it on you, it will burn you. If you get it in your eyes, it'll destroy your eyes. And there's so much power that if you get a wrench across these terminals, you'll get a huge arc and bad things will happen. So you have to be very, very careful that you don't short things, that you don't put them together backwards, that you protect it. In fact, I'm even going to tuck these covers back on, even though I've got things hooked up. I'm going to just lay them over the top so I don't accidentally get something. But at this point, again, solar is charging. We got some sun. Everything's kind of laid up here on the edge. So I'm going to put the covers on the battery box. Okay, so the batteries are all buttoned up and ready to go. Charging is set. Charge box is charging, and the battery cables for the motor are hanging right there. And I've checked that I have enough cable that I ought to be able to reach the motor. Bring that down. And I've got enough to get down to the wheel. I've got enough to get down to the center of the wheel. And the motor has cable at least that long, so I think I'm in good shape. Well, my next challenge is in getting the hand wheel loose. I've got it broken loose now, but it was a bear. This thing hasn't been off in a long time, and the brake hasn't worked properly for a long time. So what it took is been using penetrating oil on it, and then a pipe wrench on the upper shaft. That's what Hewitt recommends. And then you turn the wheel, but it was pretty tight. So that finally got it off, holding the shaft stationary with a wrench. And now all the parts are loose, and you can see it's pretty corroded in there. When I go back together with this, with the motor, I've got some Never Sees compound that I'll try to put in there instead. and get that cleaned up a little bit. Well, I ran into some fun getting the motor installed. Ended up going and renting one of these because I didn't have one that went down to 9 teeth per inch. The threads under the hand wheel were a little bit messed up, and I couldn't get the new spline to go all the way to the bottom, and it got tight. So I used this and a wire brush and cleaned that up. In the end, though, I still couldn't get it all the way down, and I came to the conclusion it maybe didn't need to go all the way down. I threaded it down until it got tight on the threads, and it had about a 1/4 to a 1/2 an inch more to go. But when I put the motor on, the spline, it lines right up. So suggesting that that it's really in the right place. So let's give it a try. I got the motor bolted on and tied down, and let's go turn the screw or turn the key and see if it works. I took my battery connections from up above and plugged in here. The motor just goes on the spline, and this torques down. And then there's a strap that ties it to the winch box, and I've got everything bolted down. So now I've got the winch all buttoned up. And this is on my Hewitt. You can see the brace. I didn't need a spacer on it. It all connected nicely and is solid. I'm going to put the cover on it now. Add that. There's a couple of straps that go around the motor to hold that cover on. The biggest trick in this whole thing was understanding that there's a spline that threads on the old shaft, and I thought it had to go all the way to the bottom, and it didn't. So once I got the threads cleaned up, it still stopped at a certain point, and then this spacer goes over the top, that washer spacer, and then the end of the spline came right out to the top of the motor here. So you could put this washer on and that nut and torque it down, and I think that's a solution. So, and then here on the inside, this is the battery mounting. You see where that tray ended up? It's hanging on the side of the rail, just a short distance ahead of the post. But I now have plenty of clearance to the boat and to the windshield. Be hanging on the side of the rail with the brackets I made. Charge controllers on the side of the rail. See, I got one bolt there in the middle between the two batteries under the rail. I had room for a couple more, but it seemed strong enough, so I put one there, and then all the other fasteners are in the top of the rail. And then there's one right here. It's just a bolt that I put through from the inside to the out, because once I put the tray in, I couldn't tie down the canopy at that bow. So it grabs it underneath, comes up around, and it was about the right length, just with a bolt sticking out to hook onto. Then I got the pendant connected down there, comes up across the top, and I put it all the way over to the opposite side and hung it over by the other rail, which is where I will be when I'm bringing the boat in. So I can start bringing the winch up or down, and then finish it off with the key. I did tie it down I got a bunch of these Velcro wraps for wrapping cords technically, and the reason I have this big roll of them is because I have this trolling motor up on the front and transducer cables that are tied to it, and I use these Velcro ones. I used those on the pendant because they're Velcro and reusable, and come winter time I may roll that pendant up and take it indoors, and rather than using zip ties or something nylon wire ties, I thought that would work, so we'll give that a try. Everything else is in pretty good shape. I was going to tie the wires down on the side, but running underneath the canopy attachments for now is working, and I'm going to run this for a few weeks and we'll see how it works out. Again, we'll see what I want to do come winter, how much stuff I take inside, and how much remains. Well, there she is, all buttoned up and finished. Got the boat all buttoned up. Right now it's sitting just about all the way down in the water. I'm going to just do a timed run here, and we'll just see how she performs. I got a timer set up here on the. this one's a cantilever hoist rather than a vertical lift. So it takes most of its load early on, and then as it gets up higher, it takes less effort. So you'll hear it really let down. When I was shopping for motors, you can get this same motor and use it in 12 volts or 24. But 12 volts runs literally half speed compared to 24, so it seemed like it made sense. But we're doing pretty good here. Coming up and out. That's pretty much it. Where's my timer? Stop. Alright, so even with a few seconds lost off, that was about 1:20. Not bad. Not bad. Well, another job accomplished. That's all for now.